Toronto, early Saturday. The streets are bleeding out the last drunks, trailing home or to whatever dark corner they can stumble into, a puddle waiting for the sun to dry it out in a few hours. These specific men, this gaggle, a group of 7 or 8, I don't really care. Their shouting echoes off the cold concrete, their voices bouncing down the alleyways like the honking of blind geese in migration. They stagger in a general direction, but there's no purpose in their movement, no sense of self-control. The alcohol has them wandering without purpose, like their only ounce of consciousness left is entirely rooted in instinct. I watch from a distance, blending into the black. I've always believed in the frame, the idea that people are nothing but reflections of the situations they're thrown into, alone. In a Sunday morning haze, these same men would probably be groaning for Advil, nursing their hangovers, but right now, in this moment, they're creatures of instinct. Giddy with insanity, they laugh like hyenas, as if the night has twisted their sense of being. They don't even seem to notice the city around them, the flickering streetlights, the stray dog wandering down the boulevard, sniffling aimlessly. The animal, despite the noisy men, doesn't change course and strolls right through them, probably blind. Poor chap. Their path leads them through a park, and that's when I see it. One of them, a short guy with a buzz cut and a black leather jacket, approaches a sleeping hobo, slumped on a bench like a forgotten doll. The group quiets for just a second, watching with amusement. Buzzcut shakes the hobo awake. No words, no aggression, just a weird, silent understanding. The hobo looks at him, and within seconds they both start undressing right there, under the flickering streetlight. As their clothes come off, I catch a glimpse of their bodies, skin marred by purple bruises, cuts that look like they've never healed properly, bones twisted and crooked, like they've been broken and reset 100 times wrong. It's grotesque, yet they laugh, almost euphoric, like they're in some cosmic inside joke. Buzzcut hands over his jacket and pants. The hobo pulls them on with a casual nonchalance and steps into the group, joining the drunken honking as if he'd been there all along. Buzzcut, now wearing the hobo's tattered coat and ripped jeans, takes the bench like it's his new home. The rest of the group moves on. I'm frozen, trying to make sense of what I just saw. But then it happens again. Another hobo, another man from the group. Same ritual, switch clothes, switch places. Except now, I notice something even stranger. The men, they're blind. Or at least, they act like it. Their eyes don't focus, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. But they navigate the streets like they can see everything. It's the shouting, their screams, their wild drunken yells. They're using sound to guide themselves incoherently. Echolocation. I clamp my mouth shut, suddenly hyper-aware of noise I might make. My heartbeat pounding in my ears like a damn drum. I'm the only one who seems to hear them for what they are. In my sudden stupor, I misstep and fall on the ground. Leaves shuffle, a branch cracks under my weight. Thankfully, the men don't seem to notice me. Just as I get up, something creeps up on me. I turn around only to find the stray dog. It locks its piercing eyes on me. Its hackles raise, and it starts growling, low and menacing. until it stops. And just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanishes into the night. As I keep following, I don't know why, because I know I shouldn't. I watch as one by one the hobos replace the men. With each switch, the group grows more frenzied, more feverish, their laughter growing sharp and jagged. Just as the first sliver of sunlight creeps over the horizon, the group halts. A lone jogger appears in the park, oblivious to the madness lurking in the shadows. In an instant, the men scatter like cockroaches, moving with a speed that shouldn't be possible given the state of their bodies. They corner the jogger by a tree, and 3 of them leap at him, knocking him to the ground. The rest stand around, watching in eerie silence as the 3 men fight over the jogger like rabid animals. Fists fly, bones crunch. 2 of the men drop, unconscious or dead, I can't tell. The last one standing, a tall guy with a shattered nose and dislocated shoulder, leans over the jogger, pinning him down. Without hesitation, he sinks his teeth into the jogger's neck. I see the blood, the way it gushes out, pulling on the ground, and then I see the transformation. The bruises on his body start to fade, his skin smoothing out, his dislocated shoulder snaps back into place. He stands up, taller, stronger, almost reborn. I don't breathe, I don't move, but it doesn't matter. The stray dog has come back, barking like a devil. The entire group turns, their milky, unfocused eyes locked onto me with predatory intent. Like a silly goose, I scream despite my better senses, giving away my exact position in space and time. The dog has stopped barking. 2 of them are already sprinting towards me, their twisted bodies moving like ferocious predators, their arms, knees, and necks all crook, all wrong. But they're too fast. They are way too fucking fast. I won't be able to get away. Someone please help. I'm not gonna reveal my name as I don't want people to trace this damn town again. So I'm gonna come up with fake names for all individuals involved. Either way. I'm now sure that this has happened to plenty of kids before and since then. If I don't reveal a name, I'm sure as hell they can't track me. I hope. For now, I'll call myself M, and my friend in this story, J. Jay was one of my best friends growing up. We would do everything together. He and I grew up on the same street, went to the same school, and tried to do as much together as possible. He was one of the sweetest people I've ever known. And that's why this event and that night still fills me with so much rage and sadness. It was Halloween night, and I remember the whole day like it was yesterday, although I wish I didn't. I was 12, and Jay was 13 at the time. Both of our birthdays were in October, so we'd always be excited about going up in number and feeling more mature and on our own on Halloween nights. This was finally the first night that both of our parents let us go trick-or-treating on our own. I know why now. But to us, it was a new sense of freedom that I felt. A freedom I wouldn't feel again after so many years. We finally are on our own now, aren't we, Em? Jay said in a leadership tone. I suppose so, I replied quietly. I had always been sort of scared of being on my own. But like I said before, the sense of freedom did feel good, so I wasn't going to complain. We went around the decorated streets with the lit up orange and yellow hues blinding us with spooky wonder. These streets were decorated like hell most years. It is the most festive town for Halloween I knew of, and honestly, it was confusing me It was confusing to me as a child when Christmas time would come around and not nearly as many places were decorated for the holiday spirit. It was almost as if Halloween was some kind of sacred holiday in this town. As Jay and I walked down the streets, I started noticing things not feeling exactly right. Any adults who were outside seemed to be staring directly at us, but they would always look away at their feet as soon as our gazes met. Some of them had the most uncanny of looks on their faces, like something was severely wrong, and it was. I noticed lights start to go out as soon as we approached to knock on the doors for candy, even though I thought to myself what kind of assholes would see kids approaching and turn their lights off on Halloween night. I adjusted my glasses to my face and looked down the street, and did see one house all the way at the end of it. It seemed to be the most decorated house on the entire block, and the brightest. Surely they wouldn't ignore us and deny us candy like that. I looked at the watch and noticed it was 11:30. This would have been our last stop for the night before heading back home. We had gotten a pretty good haul of sweets, so I wasn't upset. But this house called to us, with how festive it was for the season. They might have even been selling full chocolate bars or something. As we approached the house, though, I started hearing strange sounds, sobbing from inside the house. Not every house, but lots of them. The air felt still and tingled went down my spine. I turned to Jay. Jay, I'm actually not so sure about this house. This street is starting to freak me out a little. My young childhood stutter would always come back with a vengeance whenever I got scared. I'm not so sure about this, I repeated, tears starting to form in my eyes a little. I was nothing but a kid, so hearing others cry and feeling out in the open and so vulnerable like this made me tear up. Jay laid his hand on my shoulder. It's okay, Em, he reassured me. It's one more house where we're gonna go and get candy, and then we can go home. Jay's reassurance always worked on me. He was a persistent one, but he'd always know what to say to make me woman up, as he would say. Although looking back on it, I almost feel angry at him. Angry that he led us into the situation that we were about to enter. But I can't be. I wasn't even the one who was most hurt. We finally arrived up the long, centered sidewalks that led to the vertical home and knocked on the door. The back wood door started to slowly open. Trick or treat. Trick or... We tried to speak in unison, but my speech was stopped. Looking at this man who answered, he didn't look right. And not in a Halloween costume kind of way. His skin was pale and his black tuxedo didn't help contrast the skin even more. He seemed to be sweating bullets. He stared blankly at us through his emerald green eyes. Those damn eyes. I still remember exactly how they looked to this day. The pupil incredibly dilated and his eyes bloodshot. I pulled back my candy bag in slight apprehension, and tears started to well up in my eyes again. The man notices my scared state and finally speaks in a jittery rhythm. So kids, how was your Halloween? Sir, can you please just give us our candy? Jay responded, noticing my fear and trying to get us out of the situation. The man seemed to grow impatient, tapping his feet on the ground and saying with gritted teeth, just try to make some small talk with you kids. He pulled on his tux collar, sweating profusely. Then, I noticed around his collarbone area a patch of dried, rotten, fried flesh. Whatever was going on with it, it was sure wrong. It was so fucking wrong. At that thought, though, I felt a sting on the back of my neck. At first, I slapped the back of my neck, thinking it was some sort of insect, but I also heard a slap from Jay. Had we both gotten bit? That's when I looked behind me and saw two men towering over us. A tear was already down my face, and I slowly started to lose all power in my muscles and fell to the ground slowly. Then I fully knocked out. When I awoke, my glasses were off my face, everything was blurred, and I couldn't move. Couldn't tell if it was some sort of drugging or pure fear. In front of me was another body on the floor. It was my friend, Jay. I could recognize his dark hair and dark skin, but other than that, things were blurred beyond my comprehension. As I started to awake slightly more, I heard yelling coming from around me. "We told you to only grab one, you fucking idiot," a man yelled. They both came to my door. What was I supposed to do? Kick one away? The voice was recognizable. It was the man we just met in the doorway. "You're about to die anyways. Why don't we just put you in the sacrifice with them?" the man threatened. Sacrifice? What's happening? I wanted to cry, I wanted to speak, but I could barely move. I was stuck to the ground, seeing the blurred silhouettes of the two men standing slightly behind my friend. "Just get the job done, you fucking idiot," the man said. At that moment, the man seemed to put something in his hand up to my friend's face. My friend awoke in a loud gasp. And only noticed now that Jay was chained as the man from the front door picked them off the ground, his tall, lengthy figure barely holding them up. What happened?" Jay yelled with desperation in his voice. The man stayed silent, completely unfazed and ignoring his question. "Sir, please," Jay pleaded. "I'm sorry. Did we do something? We're very, very sorry." The desperation in Jay's voice, every word he was yelling rings in the back of my head every damn day. I couldn't see well enough to see if he was crying, but just from his voice I could tell he was. I tried my best to speak, but all I could muster up were mutters too quiet to hear Jay's yelling. My friend was being pulled away from me. I couldn't tell exactly where we were, some kind of forest from what I could hear and tell. Jay's screams became louder, but further away, and I could see the man dragging him by the chains he had him tied to into the darkness ahead of me. The screams stopped. Did something happen? I heard the rustling of chains in the distance. It was so quiet, and all I could hear was the sight of wildlife around me. Then I heard footsteps fastly approaching. Closer and closer, the dirt was being trampled. I saw dirt start to kick up near me when I saw the man from the front door run right past me, without my friend. And then I heard a scream that still haunts me every day. It was Jay. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him. His voice trembling and breaking as his scream grew louder, but it wasn't the only sound I heard. A guttural roar was let out. Whatever had just made that noise was surely no human. The roar grew in power before I heard a large crunch and a scream. Whooping in the air, more screaming. I couldn't see the thing, but I could hear the horror beyond the darkness. That was until a couple of meters ahead of me, I could see a blurry red pile of mush in front of me, followed by something slowly walking up into the moonlight. To this day, I can't describe it. Not only could I not see it clearly in the first place, but even then it seemed indescribable. It was something furry and had almost a physique and it looked like a wolf, but much larger. Its eyes were glowing red and its teeth were also red, probably not naturally looking back on it. It seemed to have patches of fur that weren't all there, showing what seemed like thin, veiny skin on the inside. It then picked up the red, mushy pile and started swinging it around in its mouth like a dog playing with a toy, blood splattering everywhere. I felt the liquid splash onto my face and it dripped down into my eye, causing half of my vision to be colored red. It stung like hell, but at the moment I couldn't care less. My adrenaline was already running so high I could barely feel it. It was then that the monster dropped the mush and started slowly walking towards me. This is it, for sure. I'm done for. I barely even lived. I'm just a kid. It's not supposed to happen like this. It sniffed and sniffed as it got closer, coming slightly more into my blurred view. It kneeled down and growled viciously, only inches from my face. At that point, I could see its mouth pretty clearly. Blood was dripping from its teeth and its entire mouth smelled like death. A death I was sure I was about to face. The creature backed away. "You've had your fix now. Get back. Get back," a man yelled. It was the man from earlier who shouted at the man from the door. A familiar voice then started shouting, "What the hell is wrong with you? Put her in all this." "Mom?" I finally made an audible noise, still on the ground, unmoving, but groaning as much as I could. "Oh my God," my mom said, "she's awake." Fuck. I heard footsteps towards me from behind, and I felt a sting once again on my neck. As I was slipping back into unconsciousness, I heard more yelling and screaming. "Do you realize what you've done?" my mom yelled. "Relax. I'll tell you what you need to do, okay? I couldn't hear anymore, and my body was once again giving up. I was drifting further and further. "Honey?" My mom was once again speaking, but as I woke up, I noticed I was no longer in those woods. I was in my room. "All the spookiness yesterday must have been a nightmare, huh?" "Mom?" I pushed myself into her arms and held in for a close hug. "Oh, sweetie," she reassured me. "It was just all a dream, okay?" But no. I backed off my mom a bit. My eye was still stinging, and later that day I was told that my friend Jay had gone missing on his way home last night. Bullshit. I know I saw that day was real, and none of the people in this godforsaken town can tell me otherwise. I tried convincing everyone, tried convincing my mom, hoping to whatever God there is that she wasn't in on this. But even she started calling me crazy. Around the time I turned 18, the scars from this incident never healed. The attitude of everyone around me shifted, and only a month into my adulthood, my mom forced me into a mental hospital for a whole year. I saw things there, things I can't unsee, but I've gone on too long. If anyone is interested in that time in my life, I might make an update to this post, but ever since I got out 3 years ago, I left that town and never turned back. I feel like I can't trust anyone anymore, but I might as well try telling some internet strangers the real truth. I still don't know exactly what's going on in that town, but I know it's something sinister. I wonder if I should go back or not. Or if I did, whether or not they would even accept me back. I worked the night shift at a data center. from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. My job is network monitoring. So basically, I stare at a computer screen all night watching for alarms. Once per shift, I walk back to the server racks and make sure all the cooling systems are functional. Assuming nothing is wrong, which is almost always the case, I am free to browse the internet until morning. Last week seemed to be no different. After receiving the turnover from the evening shift, I settled in for another boring night. I read through the day's emails, opened my monitoring software and camera feed, and started looking for the night's entertainment. My typical activity is to freak myself out by watching scary stories on YouTube. The environment is perfect. Lights dimmed, all alone in an empty building for hours. I pulled up a combination of terrifying, true, scary stories and let my imagination run wild. I was absorbed into the tense story of a hiker pursued by an unknown entity in the woods. My vision narrowed in on the screen and senses on alerts. When I thought I noticed movement on one of the cameras monitoring the server racks, I felt a pang of anxiety and my heart jumped. But this was not my first time intentionally freaking myself out. And paranoia is inevitable in this situation. I put the camera feed into full screen. The lights were all off in the data hall, as they should be. They only turn on once there's movement. Just my imagination. Still. I kept the panel open in full screen while I went back to my video, glancing back occasionally. Not 5 minutes later, I saw a shadow again out of the corner of my eye. Looking at the camera feed, I still didn't see anything, and the lights were still off, but I knew I saw something move. I got up from my desk and walked out into the hallway, then through an access door into the data hall. The rows of fluorescent lighting all clicked on at once. Flooding the room in light, I paused to let my eyes adjust and tried to slow my breathing. I strained to hear any signs of movement somewhere in the racks, but the drone of servers covered up any noise. With mounting dread, I began checking between rows. With each corner I rounded, I felt my panic grow. My heart pounded louder than the scream of the servers. As I approached the last row, I knew that whatever I saw would be so unthinkably horrible my body would not be able to hear it. I could barely breathe. My hands and face were dripping cold sweat, and I felt an urge to vomit. I willed myself forward and in a moment that felt like an eternity, rounded the corner and saw nothing. I was alone. Of course. I let myself get freaked out again from those stupid videos. Relieved, I went back to my desk. I switched over to a documentary on fighter jets, and the rest of the night passed uneventfully. At last, morning came. The morning shift came in with his usual hangover, and we discussed the non-events of the night. After exchanging a few pleasantries, I packed up to head home. On my way to my car, I noticed something under my windshield wiper. Drawing closer, I saw that it was a Polaroid picture. With trembling hands, I picked it up from under the blade and held it to my face. Rows of server racks in a brightly lit room. I stood facing away from the camera, preparing to look around the corner. In the middle of the frame, reaching out from behind the camera, a man's hand clutched a knife. We were untouchable back then. Emma, Lila, Jess, Brianna, and me, Carla. 5 girls who ruled our little town, Perfect on the outside, but rotten beneath the surface. We took what we wanted, did what we wanted without a second thought. And then there was him, Simon. Simon was easy prey, limping, stuttering, always avoiding eye contact like he was afraid of his own shadow. We hated him for how pitiful he was. Hated him even more because he dared to exit in our world. It was a joke at first, something to pass the time after one too many drinks. Just scare him a little, make him run, watch him trip over his own feet. But it spiraled. Like things do when you gone so cruel, running through your own veins. He begged us to stop. I remember his voice trembling as he stumbled through the trees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. We didn't stop, not until he fell hard. That sound, the crunch of bone hitting rock. The way his body just crumbled, limp and broken. I swear for a moment everything was silent, except for the crackle of leaves underfoot. We just stood there, staring down at him, frozen in horror. His eyes, they were still open, still wide, but he wasn't seeing us anymore. We ran. We swore we'd never talk about it again, and we didn't. We let the silence swallow the memory. We moved on, or at least tried to, but Simon didn't. It started with Brianna. She drowned in her own pool, which was strange enough, but the scratches on her neck told a different story. It was like someone had held her under. Someone who wasn't there. At her funeral, we didn't even have to say it. We knew. Then came Lila. She found out the stairs, except her parents said they heard her laughing before she screamed. Laughing. The kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl, like something inside her snapped. They found her at the bottom, her neck twisted, her eyes wide and glazy, just like Simon's. Jess didn't last much longer. She drove off a cliff late one night. Witnesses said that they saw a man standing by the edge, limping, just watching as her car went over. No one believed it, but we did. We knew. One by one, he came for them, and I watched, helpless, knowing my turn was next. I tried to run, to change, to hide. I dyed my hair, cut it short, dressed differently, even lost weight. I became a stranger to myself, thinking I could escape him, but there was one thing I couldn't change: the birthmark. A small crescent-shaped scar just under my collarbone. Ugly, stupid. I've always hated it, but now it's the thing that will be doom me. Because I know Simon remembers. Emma was the last to go before me. She started seeing him everywhere, in the corners of mirrors, in the shadows of empty rooms. She called me frantic, saying he was inside her house. The next day, her parents found her twisted in her sheets, eyes bulging, her face frozen in a mask of terror. And now it's me. I feel him, in the walls, in the whispers that creep through my empty apartment at night. He's always there, just out of sight. Just close enough to remind me that I can't escape. I try to stay awake, try to keep the lights on, but it doesn't matter. Every time I close my eyes, I feel his breath on the back of my neck. I hear that dragging limp, the sound of his twisted legs scraping across the floor. Last night I woke up to laughter. Not my own. His. He was standing at the foot of my bed, his face a pale, bloated echo of the boy we left behind. His eyes empty, like they'd never seen light. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just looked at me, his gaze sliding down to the birthmark on my chest. That cursed crescent shape that gave me away. And then he smiled. He's not here to kill me quickly like the others. No, that would be too easy. He wants me to suffer, to feel the weight of what we did pressing down on my chest, suffocating me day by day. He's going to torment me, just like we tormented him, until there's nothing left but the sound of my own screams. I can't run. I can't hide. He's always watching, always waiting. I know he'll never leave me, not until I've paid for what we did, piece by piece. Every breath I take, every flicker of light in the corner of my eye, he's there, reminding me that it's not over and it will never be over. I can't escape. He's coming for me, just like he came for the others. And when he does, I'll hear that limp dragging across the floor. I'll hear his voice whispering my name. And I'll know that this time, there's nowhere left to run. Because Simon always gets the last laugh. When I was 19, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsion disorder, OCD. By that time, the disease had already carved its mark into the skin of my hands and left the scars along my back. It had marred my shins and knees and overall left me with a terrible secret. Some things I fear are not meant to be shared. I wondered how much of this story will fall into that category. It is worth saying to those of you who complain about the arrangement of pens on your desk, saying I am so OCD. Take a moment to consider my words. Why I have to relate begins when I was around 8 years old. I will leave the sob story out of it for now and say only that I lived in a neglectful, addicted home where I, an only child, could do practically anything I wanted, if you're privy to the matter. I had all of the pre-existing conditions to allow this illness to take hold. My life was unstructured, unpredictable, and marred by a fear of rare but imminent violence, strange men, drugs, alcohol, you get it. The disease first appeared to me as a general nervousness creeped into the recesses of bright and early childhood. I was anxious about people in particular. From the time I was able to talk, my mother has recalled hearing me say, "No, Mommy," say, followed by whatever it was I was so anxious to hear. This is not a clear indicator of OCD, but it seems to track with the tendencies that followed me to the present. My mother had no way of knowing what drove me to make these odd requests. She thought, well, I believe that I was just trying to get what I wanted. Sometimes she was right. It was the times that I needed her to say no to me, or to say something a second time or a third, that she would have caught on. I wasn't interested in getting things from my mom. I was afraid this is what differentiates OCD from a general borderline illness, or a desire to be in control. If Mom didn't say yes or no at the right time, I was certain that she was going to die. I want you to let that sink in for a bit. Suspend disbelief just for long enough to form the picture. I had a very vivid imagination to my 6 or a little 7-year-old mind. If Mom didn't do what I wanted her to do, her face would swell and turn purple, her eyes would darken and lose focus, and her breath was that gurgling rattle that even a child calls death. The truth is that I had seen her in a state not unlike this more than once due to her drugs and that image appeared in my mind every time that desire occurred. I was sure, and still am, to be frank, that the consequences of one failure could be death of someone that I loved. This is what motivated me to drag myself down beneath the earth, and in no figurative way, to experience the hell that was our odd secret underworld. OCD is one unlike element that contributed to this story, oddly enough. That is the rational part. The other lies in the fact that our little trailer park existed on an outer fringes of what are likely to be countless miles of unexplored tunnels in the Mammoth Cave system. This is where OCD and unfortunate circumstances meet in my life. Imagine an 8-year-old girl, thin and weary, with dirt blonde hair, crawling through the woods on her hands and knees. She is humming a song, dragging a naked Barbie along with her in her left hand, and pulling back the thick weeds with her other to follow a thin little creek. I wasn't concerned about the dirt, nor the germs, nor the messy arrangement of my hair. My jeans, shorts, and t-shirt would be no more stained coming out of these woods than they were going in. That's when suddenly the creek disappeared. The mildness trickle of water stops abruptly, leaving my song to the wind as this curious stream drops into a hole in the ground. The hole was at the base of the hill, and it was only about 5 feet deep. 3 of the walls of the holes were dirt, and the 4th was a stone current on the side of facing me. The creek flowed discreetly into an opening just under the stone curtain. I was a curious child. To me, that cave, could have been the entrance to a magical fairy kingdom, or a buried treasure, or any measure of wonderful things. It was also a gaping mouth at the bottom of a stone face when I crawled into it. I realized it was breathing. Where I sat, legs crossed and Barbie in my lap, I could feel air being sucked into the hole. Something about it unnerved me. It was the same feeling you get when you look into a storm drain, like even entertaining the thought that something could drag you in. I don't exactly remember what happened next, but only that I left in a hurry. Either my mom called me or I heard something, but nonetheless I scrambled out of the hole and ran the whole way back home. This is where the memory kind of picks back up. I was laying in bed and it hit me. I had left my Barbie in the hole in the woods. To a normal child, this would be a problem, and perhaps even a big one. They might cry or become anxious. Not me. I knew, as if it was the verdict of a judge, that if I did not go to get my Barbie, my mother was gonna die. This is even strange for me now. My OCD doesn't usually work this way. Usually it's compelling me towards a task that is right in front of me. Challenging plus consequences equals compulsion. This was more like a sense of unrightness. Something was missing. It needed to be replaced, and now I knew what I had to do. And I knew why I was going to do it. So, that tracks, but something about it calling me out into the woods just doesn't make any sense to me. So, little me and my pajamas made my way to the trailer door, stopping only when I saw the moonlight through the cracks of the blinds. My mother's room was just down the hall. I could check on her and go back to bed for a bit. Standing there, my mind eerily on the door handle, I pictured myself returning to her room once, twice, 3 times. I knew she would be fine. I also believed she wouldn't be. I knew she would be okay in the morning. I also believed from the bottom of my heart that she would be dead right now unless I went. I hope this is as confusing for you as it is for me. You're reading this, so that means I went. The path was not hard to find. Once I reached the creek, it was just a matter of following it to the hole. I should mention the pale street light outside of our trailer. It was bright and ugly, but I thought to myself that it would be a good way to get home if I got lost out there. It was the first of a few odd things which just happened to save my life that night. The woods were much larger and much noisier now that they were ever during the day. I thought for sure that I'd passed the hole, stopping to turn back at least twice. Anyone who grew up in or around wilderness has felt this effect. The woods stretched at night. The hole sucked me in. The hole snuck up on me. I had stopped for a third time. Sure, I needed to turn back by now, but when I realized that I was standing at its edge. The thing was much wider, much deeper to me now than it had been just hours before. I lowered myself in and felt for my Barbie. To my dismay, Barbie wasn't there. I searched once, twice, again. The more I fumbled around, the more vivid the image became. Her face was pale, slightly purple around the eyes and lips. Her eyes were shut this time, filled with hollow and shadows. Her mouth was slightly open, and from her lips a gurgling, rattling breath escaped her. It was her last. That is when I felt the air sucking into the mouth of that stone face again. My stomach twisted at the realization. This thing had sucked Barbie, and I was sure of it. And even more sure was that I had to go in and get her. The deterministic thought was so forceful that it served to elevate some of my fear. When I approached the opening, crawling on my belly to see, the fear returned in full. It was black. There was no way that I could or would see there. Thankfully, I had come prepared. In my back pocket, I had brought my Cinderella flashlight. Cinderella's crown was semi-transparent plastic, and I remember changing the AA batteries only once from the time I was 4. Now, she shined just brightly enough for me to see the 4 or 5 foot drop to the cave floor. I was a very skinny child, and the opening of the cave was just large enough for me to slide through. Here's the next odd thing which saved my life. I slid in feet first on my belly. The upper lip of the opening caught my shirt and caught me before I was falling to the cave floor. The lower lip carved a fairly deep cut under my right elbow, and it pissed blood. I remember landing on the floor of the cave and just squatting there, crying and bleeding until I convinced myself to look around. No Barbie, that was for sure. The cave went on far beyond the reach of Cinderella's light. I was crouched in the little room with 2 openings to my left. The stream turned and trickled down further into the earth. To my right, the room slanted down like an attic, leaving a sliver of a tunnel in the back right of it. I shined my light around once more, making sure as I could that I wasn't leaving Barbie behind, and I prepared myself to go home. This is my last coherent memory of that night. I'm sure that may be unsatisfying to you. I spent much of my teenage years yamming the story up to people, and a man would come up from the cave, or a demon, or maybe once or twice I explained it was a giant spider. Either way, I spent so much of my life explaining it this way because I thought it was the truth. It was just a horse. I couldn't see it, but that was the sound it made coming up towards me from the tunnel. It was hooves on stone. As a child, I was just too stupid to realize how strange that was. What horse or goat or deer, what would any of those be doing down there? The second part of the story I lied about was what happened. I said that he or she or it attacked me, that I screamed and I thought I was gonna die. The truth is much stranger. I don't remember. Something came out of the hole and it scared me so badly that I gave myself the scar on my back and my arms getting away from it. And I have no recollection of what it was. Hooves on stone. Here's what I know. That street light I mentioned before saved me first. Rodney, a neighborhood kid, was outside sneaking a hand-rolled cigarette when I left. And in that pale light he saw me. He thought that was strange, but didn't think much of it. That was until the next morning, when I didn't come to school. I would get myself up and pass his house on my way to the bus stop. And Rodney would be there every morning with his granddad. Rodney got a really bad feeling and told that no one could find me. My mom eventually got out of bed and called the cops. The dogs found the hole, and the man found Barbie just outside of it. I missed her on my way in. They had to chisel out a good portion of the curtain just to get into the cave, and if not for the blood, they would have had no hope of finding me. I had taken the left turn along the creek instead. I'd gone right, shoving my body head first into the small slanted tunnel as far as I could go. When they pulled me out, the jagged rocks had torn me to shreds. I bled from my knees, elbows, forehead, and God knows where else. I'd been in that tunnel for at least 10 hours, wedged as tightly as I could possibly be. It took 3 hours to get me out, and they used rope, if you know. You know, that was murder. Needless to say, I was in bad shape. I lost much of the story to ambulances and hospitals and flashing sirens, but there's one little bit that keeps me up at night. It haunts my dreams. And when I feel it, it takes me back to time and place without any prior context. I'm crushed between two slabs of sharp rock. Everything hurts, and I can hear it first, hooves on stone. It makes some sound that I can't replay in my head. I can only remember how it felt. There's the sound of something animal, something human. It isn't angry, it isn't malice, it's cooing me. That is the sound, is cooing me like a dove, or a dog, or a mother to her child. And then there's the thing I dread the most. I hear scraping hooves, dragging flesh, falling rock. It is forcing itself in, and then I feel it, a rough, wet tongue across the bottom of my feet, cooing, lapping, cooing, lapping. I wonder how many hours this went on. Finding my mother asleep in the hospital room next to me, breathing deeply, changed me. Not all at once, but I returned there, in my head, well into my adulthood. That's the place I return to when my OCD gets bad again, and I can't leave the house. A voice in my head determined to protect me without any understanding of the world that led me to the cave to save her. She didn't need saving, or at least wouldn't accept saving. It was I, in the end, who needed saving. Somehow the one traumatic memory, the choking, the dying, can be overpowered by the other, hooves on stone. So there you have it. I don't have some silly, if anyone finds this message, to end the story. I have only a warning for those of you who share my odd disease. Remember this, your mind is trying to protect you. It doesn't know how it will supply the effect without the cause, because it was made for a world you don't understand. By the scars on my body, I advise you, do not follow it gently. Do not allow it to drag you into that place FDR's saying about fear itself was wrong. There are worse things to fear.